Welcome to Manhwa. This is the tale of how a fat kid that was relentlessly bullied had his life turned around overnight when he discovered he had the ability to switch bodies with someone who had toned muscles and drop dead gorgeous looks. Enjoy the video. A bully named Logan is seen harassing a fat kid. He kicks the kid in the head and the kid's face smashes against the wall. Later in the day, Logan, the bully, uses a gum pistol on the weak kid. The bully tells the kid to do something funny and he turns into Pikachu, which amuses the bully. This is the daily life of Daniel Park. After school, Daniel, the fat kid, is about to eat the supper his mom made for him but sees there are eggs in his ramen. This angers him, but he doesn't tell his mom that the ramen actually tastes good. He asks her if he can transfer school because he lies and says it is because everyone has good grades unlike him. Daniel's mom says that she cannot transfer him because they are too poor. This causes him to lash out and storm out of the room. He is later seen crying in bed, regretting how he treated his mom. The next day, Daniel is dreading going to school. He wished to himself that one day he would be strong and could beat the bully, Logan. Daniel's mom is seen in the school office trying to get him a transfer to another school. However, his grades are too low, and it would be too expensive. Logan is once again bullying Daniel. He kicks a soccer ball at his head and missed. This is when someone who has a suspiciously close resemblance to Messi kicks the ball with a long wind-up and caves Daniel's face in. Logan is still mad that Daniel was able to dodge his kick, so he started smacking him in the face, and this is when Daniel's mother rushes in. She screams at Logan and goes to check up on Daniel. The bullies are getting very angry and some of the female classmates start to gossip about him. Daniel's mom then unleashes an attack on Logan. Daniel looks over at the gossiping girls and starts to blush. Daniel's mom then starts questioning Logan, asking him why he is bullying her son and that he must go to the homeroom teacher immediately. Daniel once again lashes out at his mom. He says that she is embarrassing her. His mom is now being crowded and apologizes to Logan. Daniel tells her to leave. He knows he is treating his mom badly, calling himself the world's biggest piece of trash on the walk home. Walking in, he sees his mom is home and their bills are piling up. He tries to sneak inside but is caught by his mom and she says that they need to talk. While Daniel is wondering what his mom is going to say, his mom says he can transfer schools. She says that she hasn't been taking enough care of Daniel. She changed her decision from earlier because she realized that Daniel's friends were actually bullies. Daniel is startled after finding out that she realized they aren't his friends. His mom said to trust her and go and that she will take care of the expenses. After hearing those words, Daniel broke down in tears. Later he is seen on bus munching on an egg and getting ready to have a fresh start. He arrives at his street and his house is revealed to be an old shack, but Daniel Park could not be any happier. He is excited for his new life with no bullies. He goes to a barber shop, and since he is ugly, the barber takes him to the corner of the shop, but Daniel is happy. The haircut is revealed and while walking in the public, everyone is shooting him dirty looks. He gets embarrassed from all the new attention and sees himself in a mirror. He thinks he has gotten a little tougher. He starts throwing jabs in front of his reflection. He catches someone staring at him and he gets extremely nervous. Her boyfriend walks up to them and confronts Daniel. The boyfriend wants to pick a fight with Daniel but his girlfriend calms him down. He calls Daniel lucky and that he won't forget his face. His girlfriend apologizes. After that interaction, he misinterprets the girlfriend's apologetic gesture and thought that she was actually winking at him and that she was interested in him. He catches up to them and picks a fight on the boyfriend. In a second, the boyfriend lunges forwards and gets Daniel right in the jaw. People crowded around the fight and Daniel is humiliated in front of the public. After going home, he finds out that a video was posted of the fight and it had gone viral. Feeling sorry for himself, he tries to cry himself to sleep. After waking up, he goes to bathroom and feels taller and a lot lighter. After looking up and seeing his reflection in the mirror, he realizes he has been granted a perfect body. He thinks it is a dream and stumbles back only to find out that his other body was still sleeping. Hiding in the bathroom, he is still in disbelief of his strange new body. His body was filled with toned muscles. He was sure it was not a dream. Daniel searched the internet to try and find any information, but he could not find anything. He thought about calling his mom or calling 911, but he came to the conclusion that they would try to experiment on him and use him as a lab rat. Daniel tried waking himself up. He kept shaking his body, but it would not wake up, so he resorted to slapping himself. After the slap, he woke up in his normal body. He thought it was a dream after all, so he got up to go to the bathroom, but in the process he saw the other body he was just in. Curious, he tried waking the other body up, and the exact same time he went unconscious in his original body, he woke up in his new body. He told himself that he can't tell anyone about his new secret. The rules of the body swap is that when one body is awake, the other body has to be asleep. You have to fall asleep to change bodies. Daniel stayed in his house for the next few days trying to learn more about the body swap. He found out that his hunger and thirst among other things transfer from one body to the other. So if Daniel's original's body is hungry and thirsty and he sleeps and wakes up in the new body, he would still be hungry and thirsty. He agreed to himself that he needs a good sleep schedule, so he will switch bodies every 12 hours. And since when one body was asleep the other was awake, it was impossible to be unconscious since it would just transfer from one body to the other. A few days later it's time for Daniel to start school, but he is very anxious. He arrives at school and girls immediately start blushing. Daniel thinks to himself that the world looks so tiny from the perspective of his newfound body that the girls called a 10 out of 10. However, while he is walking into school, the only thought on his mind is that he hopes to not be bullied. 3 students are seen in a classroom complaining about it being too hot. One of them commands a nerd to start fanning faster. The nerd starts fanning faster with a book and thinks to himself that he is being humiliated and that he doesn't want to live anymore. A girl turns around complaining about it being too cold, but she is told to shut up. But when an attractive classmate says it's cold, one of the bullies tells the nerd to stop. The teacher arrives and introduces a new student. The transfer student walks in and everyone's jaw drops. The new student is revealed to be Daniel Park. Daniel gets nervous because everyone is looking at him. As he goes to sit down, all the girls are in awe. However, the guys are all threatened by him. But there was one person who didn't have any reaction to him at all. He greets the person sitting next to him only to find out it was the boyfriend who beat him up in front of a crowd. However, he does not realize the person sitting next to him and the person he beat up are the same person. Understandably so. A girl named Zoe introduces herself after class. Daniel didn't know how to react because he had never been flirted with before. The boyfriend, whose name is revealed to be Zach, disrupts the conversation, saying Zoe's flirting was annoying him. He glances over at his girlfriend, whose name is Mira. She is staring at Daniel. This makes Zach angry. The bell rings and they all go to lunch. Everyone in the cafeteria is seen staring at the new transfer student. But once again, Daniel is oblivious of his good looks and he is just happy he does not have to serve anyone else food, which is what he had to do to his bullies in the old school. The 3 students from earlier tell Daniel that they want to talk to him after lunch. After arriving, Daniel thinks they are going to beat him up, but instead they offer him a cigarette and ask questions about his life. This shocks him, as he was always used to people bullying him and talking down to him. Back in class, Daniel falls asleep as he spent too long worrying about school all night long. He wakes up in his original body. He curls himself up in a blanket and immediately tries to sleep again. He wakes up at school and Zoe, who is trying to get him to wake up, is startled by his sudden jerk. Later, at night, Daniel is shown at a convenience store. He explains that he got the job on the way back from school. He walked in the store, but in his new body, and he is hired instantly. The store owner thought that attractive employee would attract new customers. After he got the job, he told the owner that he is actually asking about the job for a friend of his. In the next slide we can see the store owner angry as he was expecting Daniel's friend to be good looking too. So Daniel officially got the job, but because he was not attractive his wage was cut down. This will be how Daniel uses his new ability to switch bodies. Attractive Daniel by day and ugly Daniel by night. Customers walk into the store and Daniel realizes that 2 of them are his classmates. One of them asks for 4 packs of cigarettes. Daniel asks for his ID, but when he takes a look at it, the ID says he was born in 1984. The picture does not look like him at all, so he refuses to give them the cigarettes. He threatens Daniel, saying that he just gained weight. Just then the door swings open and Zach is shown leaning on the door. He tells them to stop messing around and that they can just go to another store. He thinks to himself that the worker looks familiar, and he realizes Daniel is the person who tried to pick a fight with him in front of Mira. Daniel's heart starts to beat. Zach smirks and tells Daniel he wants to buy booze. He said that he will forgive Daniel if he buys them the booze. He tries to threaten Daniel with an intimidating glare. However, his friends in the background start talking and they think Zach is buying booze for his girlfriend to impress her, because she has been staring at the new transfer student a lot lately. This infuriates Zach and he loses his temper and unleashes it all on Daniel's face. After a beatdown, he is shown with his pants down and one of his classmates taking a picture of him. He tells him that he will post the picture if Daniel tells the police that he was beaten up. Daniel is squatting near some trash and thinks to himself that he can't rely on his mom anymore. He calls his mom and she asks him what he is doing being up so late, and he tells her that he is just taking a night stroll. His mom says that she is on a night stroll too. She asks about school and Daniel tells her he is really popular. This makes his mom happy, and we zoom out to see that she isn't on a walk but actually working hard to afford Daniel's new school. Daniel hangs up the phone telling his mom he loves her. The next day he wakes up in his new body. He feels powerful and light. At school, girls are once again talking about his looks. He walks into class and overhears his classmates talking about beating someone up and taking a picture of them, nude. Zach is proud of himself as he thinks it will impress Mira. This puts Daniel in a foul mood and he clenches his fist. Zoe wants to see the picture, but since Daniel just joined the conversation, she doesn't want to leave a bad impression. A few of the classmates start praising Zach because of his boxing abilities. He loves the praise but tries to play it off cool, telling them that he is not proud of his skills at all. He looks over at Mira expecting her to be impressed and Daniel to be scared, but instead Mira is irritated that Zach got into another fight. She tells her friend that he is always fighting and getting into trouble. She tells her about a time Zach invited her to a movie and got into a fight with a defenseless kid. Her friend tells her that she is not really surprised he is so strong because he was a rising boxer in middle school. Zach starts boasting about his boxing knowledge and says that he should have thrown a jab and not a straight punch on the convenience store worker, which impresses everyone. Daniel starts asking himself why he has to sit next to Zach, and two girls come up and ask him if he has a girlfriend. Zoe instantly moves in and talks over the two girls, asking Daniel if he would like to hang out with her sometime. While this is happening, we are shown the mysterious student who has not spoken a word yet listening to their conversation. One of his classmates then mentioned that if the worker from the convenience is a pig, his mom is too. He says he will strip both of them naked and says that if he was the pig's mother he would have given up on him. Daniel gets their attention and tells them with a serious face that they have gone too far. Everyone in the class instantly goes silent. Mira is impressed by Daniel's authority and this pisses Zach off. He kicks a table and tries to pick a fight with Daniel, calling him a worm. They take the fight outside and people from other classes go to watch the fight between the boxer and the pretty face. Zach tells Daniel to come at him but he stands still. Everyone thinks the transfer student is weak and that they all got scared for nothing. Just as Zach is about to punch Daniel, the mysterious classmate grabs Zach's arm. Because of the mysterious student's grip, Zach can't even move his hand. He looks over at Mira who is watching him and shakes him off. He goes for Daniel's face but he sees his fist and we get a flashback to Daniel at his old school because he got beat up so often he could read a fist's movement, but in his original body he did not have the physical abilities to dodge them. But now in his new body he could easily dodge the fists coming at him. Everyone is surprised by Daniel's dodge against lightning fist Zach Lee. But the most shocked person is Daniel himself, realizing his body can now move as he desired. We are in the mind of Zach and he is thinking back to when he was the fastest kid in kindergarten. In elementary school he used to bully others, and that progressed into a boxing career in middle school where he wins his fight and is taken to the finals. And in high school he continued to assert his dominance to those weaker than him. He called life so easy because he knows how to fight. We are brought back to the present, and Daniel is dodging all of Zach's attacks. One after another his body moves right to left, not letting a single attack connect. Zach realizes Daniel has a lot of fighting experience. Mira is watching the fight and Zach is tired of being humiliated, so he throws a right and then switches to a left. Daniel can't avoid the punch, but just in the nick of time he stops his punch right in front of his face. Everyone is speechless and Zach thinks that Daniel anticipated the feint punch. Zach calls Daniel a real fighter because of how cool and composed he is, but from Daniel's perspective he is sweating profusely. He knows it's getting harder and harder to dodge and is not sure if he can stop the next attack. After looking into the crowd and seeing the look on the faces of the students who talked bad about his mom, he remembered all the bad things they said about her. The emotions exploded out of him and he started dodging the punches a lot easier. He thinks about the time he got gum pistoled by Logan in his old school and remembers him saying your first punch should always be to the solar plexus. After dodging a right hook, he moved in and caught him right in the middle of his chest, sweeping Zach completely off his feet. This punch left his underlings gobsmacked as well as everyone else watching the fight. Zach could not even stand up and they all started cheering for Daniel. This was the first time Daniel was able to look down on an opponent. Zach sees Mira looking at him as he is helpless on the ground and he swears to pluck the eyes out of everyone who smiled after he was defeated. After the fight was disbanded, we can see the mysterious student in a bathroom and he overhears students plotting against Daniel. They agree to beat him up after school, and just before the scene changes, the mysterious student swings the stall door open. We are then introduced to the head of the 3 different school clubs. Vin Jean of the vocal and dance department, Eli Jang of the beauty department, and Vasco of the architecture department. A nerd walks into the bathroom as the mysterious student is walking out and we can see the aftermath of a brutal and one-sided fight. This is when the mysterious student's name is revealed to be Jay. Daniel is now at home and is reminiscing about what happened earlier that day. He said it was his first time landing a blow on anyone, and his first time getting cheered on by other people. If he were in his original body, people would just call him cruel and that he looks like an ogre. He is now at his job. He thinks about losing weight but tells himself that he doesn't have enough time because he is always busy. A man buys something and he starts to look at Daniel weirdly. Daniel says to himself that most people who come through the convenience store often give him weird looks. They all judge him by his first impressions. The beggar asks for change but then retracts his statement and says Daniel can keep it. Even beggars feel pity for him. It's 3 a.m. and since there are not a lot of customers, Daniel starts to do some exercises. He lunges from the left and then to the right. He is able to do one push-up. Just then, a girl walks through the door and Daniel thinks to himself that she is gorgeous. He thinks she will judge him too and look at him like an insect. But instead she compliments him, she apologizes if she startled him and this kind gesture moves Daniel. She also buys him a drink saying that he must be tired. She bids him a good night and leaves. Zach's underlings are shown walking down a street with a woman. The three underlings think about the fight earlier that day and worry that the rumor of them all being beaten up by Jay in the bathroom stall will spread. The only person who saw it was the nerd whose name is Jiho. Although they have a naked picture of him, they decide to call him just for further insurance. He rushes out the door and sprints to them. He arrives and they tell him he is late. One of the bullies says that because he took so long, his phone ran out of battery, so he wants Jiho to steal a charger. He begs them saying that stealing is a crime, but they don't care. They say that if he commits a crime, then they have further insurance that he can't spread the rumor. He nervously walks in. He thinks to himself that he has never shoplifted before. Jiho is worried that the store worker won't be a pushover, but as soon as they lock eyes they can tell that they are both in the same rank of the social hierarchy. He remembers what he came here for and starts sweating profusely. After he picks up the charger, he quickly tucks it under his shirt and darts for the door. Daniel tries to grab him but misses. Jiho cowardly tells him that he will pay next time, but as he's trying to run away he trips on his own leg and falls down. Instead of being angry, Daniel tries to help him up saying he will get in trouble if he leaves without paying. Jiho is thankful that he is a nice guy. Just then the group of bullies walks in and tell Jiho that they are disappointed in him for not being able to even steal a single charger. Daniel gets nervous as they shift their gaze to him. They force the two to battle each other. They call it the contest of the week. The bullies tell Jiho and Daniel that if either of them tell on them, they will spread the nude pics of both of them. Someone is listening to music and overhears the commotion behind him. It is the leader of the architecture department, Vasco. Neither Daniel or Jiho is fighting, so the bullies tell them that whoever wins gets to have their nude pic deleted. But the two still don't want to fight, so they tell Jiho that if he wins he doesn't have to serve them anymore. He thinks about all the bad things they have done to him over the years and clenches his fist, readying himself for battle. Jiho lunges forward and starts slapping Daniel with all his might. The bullies are amused at the sight of this, but at that moment a voice from behind tells them to stop the fighting. They turn around and they see Vasco walking towards them. The bullies are shocked and the two losers are unsure of what to do. Vasco grabs one of the bullies by the neck and calls them bad guys. The bully is lifted off the ground. Vasco tells all of them to go home, leaving just the three of them. They thank him and he recognizes one of them from school. He asks which department they are from. They say the fashion department and Vasco asks if that's the same class as the new transfer who knocked down Zach. Daniel tells him that he's correct. Vasco tells Daniel to tell the transfer student to not screw around. Daniel agrees while trembling because he is unsure of the reason Vasco is crying. At school Jiho is seen getting food for his bullies. He meets eyes with Jiho while in his new body and he calls him to come sit with him. With a big smile he exclaims that they are in the same class so they should eat together. Jiho is surprised from this weird gesture. Zach and his gang walk into the cafeteria and see Jiho with the new transfer student. Zach thinks Daniel is just trying to make him look bad until he hears someone in the background talking about Daniel saying he is the one who took down Zach. His head turns around in an instant and it's the head of the vocal and dance department, Vin Jin. He asks Zach if he really lost to that pretty boy. Zach admits that he was taken down by Daniel, but he tells Vin Jin that he could probably take him down. This angers him and asks Zach if he wants to die. Zach throws a punch and stops right in front of Vin Jin's face, telling him to try him. Vin Jin thinks to himself that Zach really is fast and that if he really hit him, he would have thrown him away. Daniel hears someone talking behind him, so he turns around and sees the architecture department. Daniel wants to thank Vasco for saving him yesterday, so he shouts out hi to Vasco. Only after this does he realize that Vasco won't recognize him because he is in his new body and not his original one. Vasco's second in command thinks he is trying to start a fight with him. He thinks that Daniel is just dragging around Jiho to make himself look better, so Vasco walks up to him and calls him a bad guy. Vasco asks Daniel who he is and how does he know him. He asks Daniel if he has ever been taken down. He puts his hand on his shoulder and squeezes hard. Everyone thinks that it's the end of the fight because no one has ever been able to survive the squeeze of death. Daniel withstands the squeeze and thinks to himself that it was wrong for him to be friendly with Vasco since he didn't know who he was in his new body. Vasco is struggling to keep the grip. He thinks to himself that no one has ever been able to last this long without going on their knees. Daniel grabs his hand and apologizes for startling him. Everyone's jaws drop except for Zack, and Vasco is surprised by his strength. Vin, Jin and Zack start to think they might have a real monster in their school. It would be a disaster if word got out that Vasco lost to the new transfer student. It would be a disgrace to the Burn Knuckles, which is the name the architecture crew gave themselves. Vasco lines up for a punch, but a member of Burn Knuckles slides in to stop the fight. He apologizes for the misunderstanding and his name is revealed to be Jace. Daniel is happy he didn't have to fight again. Jace thinks to himself that Daniel could be a real threat and that he needs to keep a close eye on him. Vasco speaks to Jiho and tells him that he needs to believe in himself. He must not surrender to people like Daniel. Bear in mind, Vasco still thinks Daniel is just using Jiho. From the other side of the room, Eli Yang is thinking about Daniel and how handsome and kind he is. He wonders if Daniel will let him cut his hair. We are shown the three bullies talking about a plan to get back at Vasco. They want to get close to Daniel because he stood up to Vasco at lunch and they think he can help them fight. They approach Daniel and tell him that they are having a get-together and that he should join. Daniel immediately says yes because at his old school he was always lonely since he had no friends. The three bullies are very happy with his response and they agree to meet up together at 7. Daniel is happy he had a day off at the convenience store. We can see Zoe eavesdropping on the conversation. That night Daniel asks them where the hangout is and they tell him it is at the second floor of a restaurant. Daniel is happy to finally have friends to hang out with. He says to himself that his old chats used to be prison. He goes into the alley and thinks to himself that the restaurant looks run down. He climbs the stairs and wonders if it will be one of those hidden gourmet places. He arrives at the door and takes a deep breath. He opens the door and the first thing that hits him is the hazy, unpleasant smell of cigarettes. Zack is pissed off and asks why Daniel was invited. One of the bullies tells him to come and sit as he must be hungry. Zoe says that she was walking by and just happened to bump into them. Zoe invites Daniel to come sit next to her. Daniel was thinking that he had fallen into the wrong set of friends. He says to himself that he wishes his mom was there with him right now. He felt as if he was trespassing on forbidden territory. They pour him some booze, and they are about to cheers, but Daniel exclaims that he doesn't actually drink. They all tell him he is lying and that he must drink the alcohol. After telling them multiple times that he won't drink, they give in. One of the bullies say he doesn't want to drink because he is a poor drinker, but Daniel keeps repeating that he just doesn't like to drink. Zack started taking shots like there's no tomorrow. The bullies start talking to each other, and since everyone's drunk, half of the words they use are all swear words. Daniel wants to leave as soon as possible. One of Zack's henchmen asks him where he lives and Daniel answers by saying that he lives on his own. This surprises everyone since they are all high school kids still. They crowd Daniel with questions asking if they could stay with him, but he says there's only space for 2 people and he actually lives with his friend. They ask if his friend goes to their school, but he says that he is a high school dropout. This impresses everyone as he is a lot more rebellious than they all initially thought. Zack speeds up on his shots. Zoe tells Daniel his clothes are quite big and asks if he likes to wear oversized clothes. Daniel explains that they are his friend's clothes and that their frame is quite big. Everyone assumes that his friend is 100% a gangster from his description. They all say in unison that Daniel is a lot more dangerous than they thought. Zack starts taking shots at super speed. The owner comes inside to collect some of the bottles and she locks eyes with Daniel. She is instantly swept away. She wonders to herself who the pretty boy is. Her husband died 10 years ago, so she thinks this is a present from heaven to cure her loneliness. She makes a move on Daniel asking if there's anything else he wants to eat. This ticks Zoe off, so she retaliates by getting nice and close to Daniel. The owner is annoyed that Zoe is being aggressive, so she acts as if her hair tie is coming loose to expose her chest. All of Zack's underlings start to have nosebleeds. Daniel is now stuck between 2 animals, a dragon and a tiger. Zack wishes that Mira was with him. The other group in the room realize that they are school kids and complains that they are making too much noise. Zack nearly passes out from all the alcohol. He gets Daniel's attention and Daniel thinks that he is going to try and swing at him, but instead he starts talking about how he is jealous that Daniel is so handsome. He asks Daniel if they can be friends and that they can hug it out. He then proceeds to kiss him. This surprises Zoe, but not the other 3, as apparently this isn't the first time he has done this. She gives Daniel a cup of water, saying he must be tired. He starts gulping the water only to realize it's booze. He apologizes to his mom for underage drinking and committing a grave crime. The other group yells at them, telling them to keep the volume levels down. They say that kids have no manners anymore. They talk amongst themselves, wondering if they should teach them a lesson. The women comments, saying that it is always the women with big chests that have the ugliest faces. Zoe breaks the shot glass she is holding and grits her teeth. Daniel tried to get Zoe to calm down, but she retaliates by asking the women if she is wearing a bra just to stay warm. Daniel gets more nervous for the battle that's about to occur. The room goes silent for a second and the woman erupts, daring her to say it again. Zoe plays dumb and the woman tells Zoe to stop playing innocent. They start calling each other very bad names I can't say on YouTube, and we can see the reactions of everyone around the room. While this is happening, Daniel's eyesight begins to get blurry. His heart starts to race and he says he feels strange. Daniel is now drunk. One of the men get up to teach the kids a lesson and they all try to avert his gaze. He asks the kids how old they are and they think to themselves that even if they fight, they have Zach, but he is flat out wasted and is apologizing to the grown-ups. They glance over at Daniel and they can tell he is acting strange. They can all tell that he is clearly irritated. The bullies think to themselves that they might have a shot if Daniel is fighting as well. They answer that they are all 20 years old, and the grown-ups follow up by asking them for their IDs. They reject. The grown-up with the brown beanie goes for one of the bullies. He yanks his head back by pulling his hair. Just as he is about to smack him, Daniel shouts out to the grown-up. He gets their attention and asks them with a serious face what they are doing and are they trying to pick a fight. Daniel thinks to himself that it's weird he feels no fear in front of the adults. He points at the bullies and reprimands them for underage drinking, insulting mothers, and always looking for trouble. He asks them if it's fun hitting people and if they enjoy acting like fools. He tells one of the bullies, who he calls Pointy, to give him his phone. Mr. Beanie thinks that he's scared and wants to call his mom, but instead he smashes the phone with nothing but his bare hands. He tells them to never take dirty pictures of anyone ever again. Everyone in the room gets scared from his show of strength. Daniel thinks to himself that they need to apologize. So he goes ahead and grabs a bottle of booze so that they all could raise a glass and forgive each other. But instead, he drops the bottle by mistake. When he tries to grab it, the bottom of the bottle hits the floor so it looks like Daniel is now wielding a lethal weapon. Daniel says that he just wanted to pour them a drink but his hands got slippery. Everyone assumes that he did it on purpose and just made it look like an accident. The bullies call him an evil genius. Daniel continues to apologize while holding the weapon, so everyone still thinks he intends to use it. Two of the adults get scared but the woman starts pouting at the sight of her man acting so weak. So he gets angry and starts shouting at Daniel, telling him that he ruled over a high school called John High. He asks them which school they go to. They tell them again that they are 20, but Zach lets the cat out the bag, telling them that they are first-year fashion students at J High. Mr. Beanie tells Mr. Necklace that J High is notorious for strong fighters, but they think it will be alright since they are just first years. Daniel tells himself that they have messed up big time and tries to apologize again, but, while holding the bottle, the adults call him a maniac.
Mr. Beanie nervously tells Daniel that since he apologized, they will give him a break. Mr. Necklace starts backing away, telling his girlfriend that they need to get out of there now. Daniel gets confused as to why they left so quickly. Everyone starts to praise Daniel after scaring the adults away. They talk to themselves, saying that they were all pooping their pants. Daniel is clueless as to why the adults left the fight so suddenly. The scene changes and we are shown the adults smoking in an alleyway. They are annoyed that a bunch of high schoolers got the better of them, so Mr. Necklace tells his girlfriend to call some of the juniors of the school he used to rule over to get some payback. They arrive and stand at attention. He asks them what year they are in, and Glasses tells him they are seniors now. Mr. Necklace asks Glasses if he can ride his bike, and Glasses says yes. But he didn't have the bike with him at that moment. He tells him he is lying, but he stands by the fact that he doesn't have it. Mr. Necklace changes the subject and asks Glasses if he knows anyone from the fashion department at J High. He tells him he does know one person, but he doesn't like mixing with them because everyone from J High is known to be crazies. Necklace cuts him off and tells him to bring that person to him. Glasses asks him why he wants him, and he tells him because there is someone that needs to be taught a lesson on how to act towards people older than them. We are back with Daniel, and he thinks to himself that the liquor has started to kick in. The bullies start talking to each other about previous fights they had and everyone they have beaten up. One of them tries to get close with Daniel, but he shoots him a death glare. The bully is stunned. Daniel looks him dead in the eye and says 2 words, "Let's go." The authority that Daniel put into those words shocked everyone around the table. The alcohol has affected his balance, and he needs to sit down. He says he is thirsty, so he goes to drink some water, and halfway through he realizes it is more alcohol. He starts to get sleepy from all the booze he has drunk. His vision starts to get blurry, and his eyes start to close. He wakes up in his original body. Now that he is not intoxicated, He gets embarrassed about all the things he did and said. He goes back to sleep to switch bodies again. He wakes up in his house again. He looks at the ceiling and at his hand. An hour has passed, and he comes to the realization that he didn't change bodies. He gets dressed in world record time and darts out the door. He ran up the stairs, looked around the corner, and saw his body lying there, being slapped by the bullies who are trying to wake him up. Daniel wonders to himself why he couldn't change back. Just then, one of the bullies turns around and sees him standing there. He asks him who he is and why he is just standing there. They recognize him as the fatty from the convenience store. Daniel gets scared as their friendly expressions from earlier have turned into hungry hyenas. Two bullies start towering over him, and the other bully asks him if he wants them to take naked pictures of him again. Zoe gives him a sour look, and the owner of the place demands him to show her his ID, or he must get out. He looks down and sees his passed-out body on the floor. Daniel thinks to himself how he will explain to everyone why he needs to take his other body home. Just then, Zach comes crashing through with a large smile on his face. Zach gives Daniel a great hug and says he is so happy to see him. He gets defensive of him since everyone was looking at him like prey before. He gives Daniel some booze and asks him if he wants to drink. Daniel is relieved that Zach is drunk right now, otherwise it would be a one-sided beatdown. Zach asks him why he is here, and Daniel says that he is here to get his friend Daniel. This shocks everyone, as they wouldn't think that Daniel in his new body would hang out with people like Daniel in his original body. They call him a liar, but he insists that Daniel knows him. Zoe connects the dots of their conversation earlier and asks if he is the mafia boss that stays with him. Daniel replies by saying that he was ordered to fetch Daniel by his housemate. This story is a lot more believable, since Daniel in his original body does not give off mob boss vibes. Zoe gets excited and asks him if he knows where Daniel lives. Daniel dismisses her questions and Zach goes over and comforts Daniel. He tells Daniel that he wants to take them somewhere as a reconciliation gift. We are shown Daniel carrying his other body on a road. They arrive at an arcade where there is a punch power machine. Zach tells him to watch close. He tries to teach Daniel how to throw a proper punch. He gets his stance and tells him to guard your cheek with your other fist. He puts both his arms up and shows him the basic posture of boxing. He takes one step forward and moves the weight from his pelvis into his shoulder. He throws the punch, moves the weight into his fist, and jams it into the machine. The machine exclaims that Zach got a new record, and then he goes back to being drunk. Zach wishes Daniel a good night, and the bullies follow him. Daniel looks at the punching machine and wonders to himself if he should give it a shot. He looks around to see if anyone is watching him. He bundles up his fist, throws his fists like a boxer, lunges forward, takes a deep breath, and completely misses the punching pad. Feeling completely embarrassed, he picks up Daniel and walks home. Vasco comes out of a shop with Jace and sees Zach's new record. He tries it for himself and beats Zach's record by 18 points. Just before he is about to leave, he sees a rip mark on the side of the pad where Daniel threw his punch. Vasco thinks to himself that even though Daniel only grazed it, the pad was ripped through the plastic and into the cushioning. Vasco glances at Daniel, who is walking away, and wonders to himself if Daniel will ever overpower him one day. Daniel finally makes it home with his new body. It's the next day, and two girls start admiring Zach. He has a date, and he promised not to pick a fight with anyone. A few hours earlier, we can see Mira talking to her friend, and she mentions that she's going to walk to the library later to study. From behind, Zach asks Mira that he will be studying too, and asks if they can go together. She looks him dead in the eye and tells him no. Mira says that Zach gets into too many fights, but he promises to not fight while blushing. And this was enough to get a yes from Mira. We are back to the present, and Zach is reminding himself that he absolutely cannot fight with anyone. Mira calls out for Zach, and she says that she is excited to go to the library with him. They arrive at the library, and Zach is excited to spend time with his girlfriend. Zach starts thinking of them sitting next to each other and eating together. He thinks to himself that he is in heaven. Not too soon after they sit down, he gets incredibly bored. He starts making marks on the desk to entertain himself. Apparently, the girls' and the boys' study room is separate, so they aren't allowed to sit next to each other. He starts grumbling to himself, and one of the students that are studying there asks him politely to quieten down. Zach shoots him a death glare but calms himself, so he doesn't end up in a fight. His phone buzzes and we are shown messages from Mira, asking him to meet her at the snack bar because she is hungry. Zach is excited to see Mira after what felt like eternity. The scene changes and we are shown two of the adults from the bar, and they are arguing about something. Mid-conversation, the girl stops and looks at Mira and Zach from the other side of the room. She recognizes Zach from the bar, and Mr. Necklace remembers him as being the weakest one. He glances at her chest and gets annoyed that his girlfriend doesn't have the same thing. He looks over at his girlfriend and she also starts to get frustrated. Zach is innocently munching down on a corn dog. He looks around the room and notices that they aren't the only couple at the library. He tells Mira he is going outside for some fresh air and takes out his cigarettes. He hasn't told Mira he has started smoking yet, so he must smoke in secret. He sees two people walking up to him, so he looks at them intimidatingly. They ask for some directions, and he politely gives it to them, hiding his cigarette as a show of respect. Mira is revealed to have been watching him this whole time, and she is happy to see Zach being kind to other people. The adults from the bar show up, and they underestimate him because their only impression of him is when he was previously drunk. They tell him to call his friend from before, but instead he just blankly looks at them. The scene changes, and we can see Daniel's mom looking at a piece of paper with an address on it. The scene switches back to Zach, and the grown-ups continue to berate him with insults. They talk to each other about how he cried like a little baby last time they met, and this makes him embarrassed and wishing he never got drunk that night. Zach looks at them with a serious face and asks them if they are trying to start a fight. Just then, he remembers Mira telling him that she doesn't like it when he fights. He allows them to go and says it's their lucky day. They all burst out in tears and start pointing fingers at him. Mr. Necklace asks Zach if he has lost his marbles, and they all continue to laugh at him. He turns around telling them that he won't give them a second chance. Just then the adults look like they are plotting something devious. He joins back with Mira and he asks her if she wants anything to drink. He goes to the till and asks for 2 sodas. Just then Mr. Necklace and Mr. Beanie cut in line and call him a loser. However, Zach remains calm and tells them not to cut in. They ask him what he is going to do if they cut in, and they show Zach their big friend who will protect them. One of them pets Zach as if he is their pet, and he clenches his fist in anger, but he can't start a fight, otherwise Mira will be upset. So he removes himself and Mira from the room, so he doesn't start a fight. The adults are angry. They didn't get to show off their big friend. As Zach arrives at his desk, he realizes his potato chips he bought for Mira have been stolen. He hears some crunching from across the room, and he sees the 3 adults munching on his snack. He is taken aback and starts to get furious, but clenches his fist once again and can control his anger. Later, the big guy is seen shooting rubber bands at Zach. He shoots him a death glare and tells him to stop irritating him. They pretend to be scared, before erupting into laughter again. Zach gets up and slams the door on the way out. He is trying to stop himself from exploding in anger, and just in the nick of time, Mira slides in, next to Zach. She asks him if Mr. Necklace and Mr. Beanie are trying to start a fight with him, but he denies it. Suddenly, the big guy shows up and messes up his hair that he spent an hour getting ready. He is at the breaking point while telling them to go away nicely. The big guy persists, asking Mira for her number, and tells her that she is way out of Zach's league. She stands up in defense of Zach and signals to him that she wants to leave. Just then, the big guy pins Mira under his arm and tells her he wants more than just her number, while moving his hand to her chest. But before he could carry out this terrible act, Zach darts towards him and sucker punches him right in the jaw, sending multiple teeth straight to the tooth fairy. The adults are speechless at his sudden act of bravery and strength. Zach apologizes to Mira for breaking their promise of no fighting. Now that Zach has broken the promise, he takes his anger out on Mr. Beanie and Mr. Necklace. He tells them to never lay a finger on her again, and Mira is shown with a smug look on her face. The scene changes and we can see Daniel's mom waiting for him to wake up. She thinks to herself that he must have been exhausted since he is in deep sleep mode. We can see Daniel in his new body at the door, and he wonders why the door is open and hopes no one has broken into his house. The scene switches again, and we can see Zach apologizing to Mira for breaking their promise. However, it is revealed that she is actually happy that he stood up for her, and she wants to go on another trip to the library with him. We switch back to the scene with Daniel's mom, and she wonders whether to wake him up or not. just as she is about to nudge Daniel. Daniel, in his new body, walks through the door. His mother turns around and asks who he is. Daniel is gobsmacked that his mother is in his house. He starts thinking of an excuse to say. He greets his mom, asking if she is Daniel's mom. He says that he has heard a lot about her and explains that Daniel is living with a friend to cut down on the rent, and he is that friend. He tells his mom that Daniel sleeps during the day after school so that he can be energized for his part-time job so that he can afford his living expenses. His mom has a smile on her face and says that Daniel has grown up. She asks him for his name, and he says it is Park. She says that is similar to her son's name, which is Daniel Park. What a coincidence. She asks if he can tell her a little bit more about Daniel and how it's been living with him. We switch scenes, and we can see Jace in a cafe. He says welcome to the customers walking inside, and the customers are actually Daniel and his mom. Jace instantly recognizes him as the fashion department transfer student. Daniel's mom looks around and can see everyone looking at Park since he is so handsome. He asks her what she wants to drink, and she says she wants an Americano. Daniel's mom looks at the prices and then tugs on Daniel's arm. She asks if she can have water instead, because it is too expensive, and she doesn't want him to spend too much money on her. Daniel is taken aback by his mother's question. He reassures her that he can afford it and gets the 2 Americanas. He starts to remember all the sacrifices his mom had to make for Daniel to transfer school. So buying an Americano is the least that he can do. He makes a promise to himself that one day he will pay back his mother for all the hard labor she had to do for him. Jace puts 3 coffees down on a table, and we zoom out to see a few of the architecture members sitting down. Jace warns Vasco not to get in a fight with him because of what happened last time at school. Otherwise, he will be fired. Daniel's mother starts to boast about her son and says stuff like he grew up to be so big and handsome. Daniels is getting embarrassed as he is hearing things that his mother wouldn't usually say in front of him. She signals Jace and asks if she can take the boxes in the corner of the room. She apologizes to Daniels if she's embarrassing him, but she can't miss out on the opportunity. She asks Daniel not to tell her son about her collecting boxes to earn extra money for his school fees. She takes out a 5,000 yen bill and asks Daniel to continue being friends with him and to please not bully him. Daniel grits his teeth and tries to hold back his tears as he accepts the bill. He knows that 5,000 yen is a lot of money for his mother, so he really doesn't want to take it, but he needs to sell the idea that he is Daniel's friend, Park, and not Daniel. She waves goodbye to Park and tells him that next time she will bring some side dishes to enjoy together. He hears his name being called, so he turns around, and it's Vasco telling him that he's not as honest as he thought. He signals Daniel to follow him as he wants to have a fight. He leads Daniel to a construction site and tells him to prepare himself. He takes off his jacket and tells Daniel to do the same, but he is frozen stiff in fright, so Vasco thinks that Daniel is confident that he can win without getting his clothes creased. Vasco cracks his knuckles and tells him to start the fight. He thinks back to the time that Daniel made original. Daniel carry him on his back, and now even ripping off his mom, but accepting money from her. He tells Daniel that he is unforgivable and puts his arms up ready to start the battle. He tries to back away from the fight, telling him that he's not taking advantage of anyone, but Vasco doesn't want to hear any of it. He throws a left jab and barely misses Daniel's face, missing it by mere centimeters. Vasco starts to wonder how much training Daniel had to do to achieve the physique he has now. Daniel tries to clear up the confusion again by telling Vasco that he is mistaken, but before he can finish his sentence, he goes for a right jab this time, but Daniel is more prepared. Vasco continues throwing punches, but Daniel is able to weave and slide between all of them. He steps back and tries to figure out how to strike Daniel without him being able to dodge. Daniel shouts at Vasco, insisting that he has done nothing wrong. Vasco thinks to himself that Daniel is either a good liar or he feels no guilt. He tells Daniel to give him the money that he received from Daniel's mom. I will give it to the convenience store worker, thinks Vasco. Daniel now starts to think that Vasco is just another bully that steals from the weak. He is used to giving people money, as there was no other way to defend himself. But this time, it's different. This money was given to him by his hard-working mom. It's special to him. So he tells Vasco that he will never let go of the money that Daniel's mom gave to him. Vasco smirks and thinks to himself that Daniel is now showing his true colors. He puts his fists up and imitates Zach's boxing posture. Vasco thinks to himself that if it is an outboxer he is fighting, he can definitely win the fight. He plans to trade blows, but he thinks that he hits harder than him. Vasco puts his fists up and they resume the fight. Daniel takes a step forward just as Zach would do. Vasco sees that Daniel is imitating Zach's fighting style and moves in as well. They both end up with a fist in front of their face, and Vasco exclaims that he has won. Some time has passed, and we see the bare knuckles at the construction site. They find Vasco's jacket on the floor, so they keep exploring the place, and they find Vasco on the ground barely able to move. We are now at the convenience store with Daniel's original body. He is happy he still has the money and hopes he didn't kill Vasco by mistake. He thinks back to when he was fighting Vasco and wonders how his body moved when it did. Before Vasco landed the blow, Daniel spun his head around and moved closer to Vasco and performed a backspin elbow straight to his jaw. In that moment, Vasco knew that he couldn't beat Daniel how he is now. Jace stands over Vasco and he mutters, "Jace, I lost." Jace is filled with anger and wants to avenge his friend. We shift our focus to a new character who shares his story about life and finances. He describes his home as pretty standard and his wardrobe as nothing special. If he were in a role-playing game, he'd be fully equipped with just the basic gear. His mom hands him down a pair of his uncle's old shoes, and he decides to wear them to school. He's anxious that his classmates will tease him for wearing shoes that are a decade old. However, as he walks into school, two girls notice his footwear. To his surprise, they reveal that his shoes are actually quite rare, with only a few thousand pairs ever made. This character is named Lee. Lee loved the attention he got from wearing trendy clothes, so he began fixing up vintage shoes to stand out. He also splurged on some fancy glasses and mentioned that he traveled 2 hours just to buy chrome rings that are popular among a famous idol. Feeling all decked out in gold, he heads to class, but soon gets called out by Zach for their matching shoes. Zach doesn't want anyone to think they matching on purpose. However, since Zach is trying to keep the peace for Mira, he just warns him not to let it happen again, and walks off. Lee misinterprets this, thinking that Zach got intimidated by his chrome heart rings and hurried away. Proud of himself, he turns around and notices Jay's fingers, which are also filled with chrome hearts. Looking around, he realizes that others have chrome hearts on their fingers too. Just then, Daniel enters with a big smile, sits next to Zach, but tells him not to talk to him or look at Mira. Lee feels envious of Daniel because he always seems to attract attention, no matter what he wears. He glances at Daniel's bag and notices it's old and worn out. His shoes aren't from a fancy brand either, and it looks like he wears them every day. As Lee talks to himself, he can't help but point out that Daniel's style is lacking, leading him to think Daniel must be struggling financially. Everyone around assumes that since Lee is good-looking, he must be wealthy, so this revelation about Daniel surprises them all. Jay stays quiet, staring out the window, and I can't help but wonder what's on his mind. The scene shifts to the Bare Knuckle Architecture Club, where everyone is waiting for Vasco to show up since he's been missing all day. They start chatting and speculate whether the rumors about him losing a one-on-one match are true. Everyone turns to Jace for some insight, but he remains silent. Suddenly he receives a text from Vasco. A message comes through saying that his screen is broken and he's curious about the repair costs. He sends Jace a screenshot of his phone to show just how bad the damage is. Jace can't help but think that you can't really show a broken screen with a screenshot, and he struggles to keep from laughing. With Vasco out for a bit, Jace starts to consider how to handle Daniel. He tells everyone that Vasco texted him to take it easy and hold off for now, but one of the crew members sees Vasco's message on Jace's screen and realizes he's just stalling. He thinks to himself that Jace doesn't have what it takes to lead the Bare Knuckles, so he tells himself he needs to step up and restore their leader's honor by himself. The school day is over and we see Jay leaving his desk. Daniel pops up and with a big smile tells him to be safe on his way home. Jay just stares at him. Daniel thanks him for helping him in his fight with Zach. He waves goodbye, saying his mom is about to pick him up. Jay, once again, just stares. Two girls talk about him and say that although he looks like royalty, his clothes and bag make him look like he is poor. The guys in his class call him a beggar and says that without his looks, he is just a cheap-looking loser. They pledge to make the girls know who he really is without his good looks. At the back of the school, we can see 4 members of Burn Knuckles talking amongst themselves, getting ready to beat up the new transfer kid, Daniel. They all start gossiping about Jace, telling each other that he's just a wannabe leader who can't handle things like Vasco does. The ringleader smirks, pleased to see his plans falling into place. But just around the corner, we spot the mysterious Jay, casually smoking a cigarette and listening in on their whole conversation. They're plotting to jump Daniel after school, since that's when he's usually by himself. The next day after school, Daniel is walking home, humming a cheerful tune. Suddenly he runs into someone on a quiet street. Could it be the bare Knuckles seeking revenge? Nope. It's Jay, carrying a bag over his shoulder. Daniel asks if he lives nearby too. Without a word, Jay sets the bag down, revealing a tag that says, "Happy Birthday." Daniel looks inside the bag, and it turns out to be filled with expensive clothes. He tells Jay that it is too expensive for him to take, but Jay signals to him saying that he was throwing out the clothes anyway, as they don't fit him anymore. He loosed down, thanking Jay for his birthday gift. But when he looks up and asks Jay when his birthday is, he is nowhere to be seen. He looks around and sees a pile of more bags filled with clothes. We see the aftermath of a fight between the Bare Knuckles group that wanted to beat up Daniel and a mysterious fighter who beat them all up. I wonder who it could be. The leader wonders who the blonde guy was who beat them all up and how he got so strong. It's the next day at school, and the 3 guys who were previously calling Daniel cheap for not having nice clothing are getting ready to tease him about his empty bank account to make them look better. To the surprise of the 3 musketeers, Daniel strolls in decked out in the latest fashion. He's rocking a stylish waistcoat, camo rock-stud sneakers, a fancy bag, and a designer watch. The 2 girls, who were curious about his money situation just a few days ago, are now praising his outfit and saying he looks even more handsome. One of the musketeers asks Daniel about his wallet, since it doesn't have any luxury brand logos on it. Daniel simply replies that it's a gift from his mom, and he wouldn't trade anything in the world for it. Lee starts to rethink his own choices, wondering if all the pricey clothes he bought were really worth it. Everyone keeps complimenting Daniel, saying he must really appreciate his mom. Daniel waves at Jay, thanking him for the clothes he got yesterday, but Jay isn't looking his way. Still, he's thrilled that his new clothes fit him just right, and we can see Jay crack a smile. At a talent agency, we see Vin Jin laying down some amazing beats. The manager mentions that he's one of the top contenders from the latest auditions. He asks if Vin Jin is the last one, and the staff member replies that there's still one more participant. We find out who that last person is, and the manager immediately frowns, instructing the worker to turn away anyone who looks like that. He tells the last participant to leave, and then congratulates Vin Jin for winning the audition. He boards a bus where 2 girls gossip about him, saying he looks like an otaku and probably doesn't have many friends. He notices the empty seat next to him, but people choose to stand instead. Later, he goes to bed, jotting down lyrics for a new song, and tells his grandma to hang in there a little longer because he's determined to sign with a record label and make enough money so she won't have to work anymore. We're at school, and everyone is showering Vin Jin with compliments for signing with a famous talent agency. He glances at Duke, the guy who got rejected from the agency for not being good-looking enough, and makes a snide remark about feeling bad for being the only one who passed the audition. Then, Vin Jin strides over and kicks Duke in the head, telling him he shouldn't have even bothered showing up, and that he's embarrassed to have him there. Some classmates ask Vin Jin if he plans to participate in the charity date auction at the festival. This auction is a big deal where freshmen enter, and girls bid on different guys for dates, with the highest bidder winning. The girls are chatting about all the guys who will be there and which ones they're interested in. Some girls are really into the guys from the fashion department. Others have a thing for the guys in architecture, and a few are crushing on Eli from the beauty department since he's the only guy there. But most of the girls are super excited about a new transfer student in fashion. The catch is that girls from other schools can also bid for a date with him, which means it's going to be pretty pricey. While the girls are chatting, one of Vin Jin's friends starts writing on Duke's back. At the end of the day, Duke is heading home from school and asks his grandma if she had a lot of sales, but she avoids the question and instead asks if he's hungry. telling him to eat quickly. He explains to her that the food is for selling, not for eating. Just then, he hears someone calling his name, and Duke's heart sinks. It's Vin Jin and his crew. Duke's grandma asks if they are his friends, and insists they should eat since they must be starving. They devour all the food at the stall, leaving a huge mess behind that needs to be cleaned up. Duke spots a bag of chips that fell on the ground, and his grandma comments on how energetic his friends are. Duke is left speechless and feels bad, apologizing to his grandma for letting her down. The next day at school, everyone starts making fun of how awful his grandma's cooking is. There are drawings on the board warning everyone not to eat at his grandma's stall. Duke feels a surge of anger as he clenches his fist. Suddenly, Vin Jin yanks Duke's hair and tells him to get out of the walkway. Duke can't help but think that maybe things would be different if he were good-looking and not stuck in his short, chubby body. A girl named Mary asks if there will be any other contestants in the festival besides Vin Jin and his friends. The classmates whisper that there's no way anyone else could win, but then Duke raises his hand and boldly declares that he will be joining the festival too. It's lunchtime, and you can spot Daniel and Jiho grabbing some food. Daniel looks over at a few tables and notices Vin Jin picking on Duke. This brings back memories of how he was treated at his old school. Daniel turns to Jiho and asks if he can invite Duke to join them for lunch. The cafeteria buzzes with reactions as everyone is surprised that someone like Daniel would sit with Jiho and Duke. Vin Jin listens quietly to the chatter about how nice Daniel is being. Suddenly, a cup is thrown in Duke's direction, and Vin Jin tells him to fetch some water. Jay shoots a glare at Vin from behind Daniel. Zach steps in and tells Vin to get the water himself since his hands aren't broken. Vin Jin threatens Zach, asking if he wants to get hurt. Zach retorts by questioning if Vin can even see with those glasses on. Just then, Vasco chimes in. Vin Jin is told by Vasco to pick up his cup. He starts to get annoyed and wonders why everyone is bothering him today. Vasco asks him if his mom ever told him to not throw things on the floor. Frustrated, Vin Jin kicks a chair as he storms out of the cafeteria. Once the chaos settles, all the girls flock to Daniel, asking if he plans to join the charity date auction. Mary comforts Vin Jin, saying she understands why he didn't stand up for himself. Meanwhile, Vasco looks around the room and begins to cry. The school day wraps up, and Daniel is seen cleaning the floor in his classroom. He reflects on the girl's question and considers whether he should perform at the festival. Daniel glances around to check if anyone is nearby. We see Duke wandering through the hallways, lost in thought, wishing he had a tune to go with the lyrics he had jotted down. If only he could find someone who could really sing. Suddenly, Daniel opens his mouth and begins to sing. This immediately grabs Duke's attention. Daniel is perched on the windowsill, belting out a song. Duke feels a rush of excitement, thinking he might have just found his perfect partner. He thinks to himself that Daniel's voice seemed to reach out to him, filled with emotion, space, and a hint of fragrance. I couldn't figure out why his voice felt so isolated, even though he was such an amazing guy, said Duke. When the song finished, Daniel glanced around anxiously, worried that someone might have overheard him. Suddenly, someone on the other side of the door said, "Excuse me." Duke approached Daniel and invited him to perform at the festival. Daniel was completely taken aback. Duke expressed his faith in Daniel's rapping skills and encouraged him, saying that if they teamed up, they would really impress the crowd.
Duke can hardly believe that one of the most popular kids in school is hanging out at his place right now. He secretly hopes that Daniel won't say anything about the house being messy or too small. Daniel notices the light switch and tells Duke he shouldn't leave the lights on all day, or else he'll end up paying more for electricity. Then, he goes on to share a few more tips on saving money, and Duke is really impressed by how much Daniel knows about. They head into the studio, and Duke hits play on one of his new songs he's been working on. Daniel listens and says it sounds really good. Duke looks away, feeling shy, and says it's not finished yet, and he still needs to fine-tune the audio. As they prepare for the performance, Duke tells Daniel he can start with the melody because he doesn't want to kick things off himself. His strong voice might overshadow Daniel's part. Daniel begins to sing the melody, and Duke praises his voice, saying it sounds really genuine, even if his singing is just slightly above average compared to his looks. Duke reminds Daniel not to sing too hard or loud, or he might hurt his vocal cords and won't be able to sing properly until after the festival. They take a stroll outside, and Daniel starts to complain about his throat feeling sore. Duke warns him not to sing for the rest of the day. Suddenly, They hear Duke's name being called. It's his grandmother, selling food at her usual stall despite being sick. She asks if Duke and his friend want something to eat, thinking they must be hungry. Duke remembers the time Zach and his friends devoured everything at the stall and left a huge mess. Daniel says they just ate, but he appreciates her kindness, even though she has her business to run. As night falls, we see the real Daniel, eager to practice his singing again now that he's in a different body and his vocal cords are well rested. He opens his mouth, and surprisingly, his vocal cords feel perfectly fine. This means he can practice singing all day and night. He begins to work on the melody from Duke's song. The attractive girl who bought him a drink earlier walks in. She praises his voice, telling him that he has a beautiful singing talent. After that, she grabs a box of energy drinks and gets one for Daniel too. She encourages him to keep going and then heads out. Daniel thinks to himself that she might be the most beautiful girl he has ever seen. He glances over at the entrance and sees Duke and Jiho coming in. Jiho quickly apologizes for the last time when he tried to take a charger and ended up in a fight with Daniel. Daniel reassures him that it's all good since he was forced into that situation. They all sit outside, sipping their drinks, and start sharing their experiences with bullying, discussing the names they were called and the things they endured. Daniel feels a sense of relief being able to talk about these issues and is glad to know he's not alone in facing such challenges. Jiho pulls out a cigarette and starts smoking, thinking that it makes him look the coolest of the three. The conversation shifts to Zach, who used to be a major bully but has changed his ways. They also talk about another Daniel from school who is nice enough to let them eat with him. Duke expresses his gratitude towards Daniel, calling him really kind. Vasco suddenly grabs Jiho's cigarette and questions if they're being honest. They explain to Vasco that Daniel invited them to join him for a meal, that he doesn't flaunt his strength, and that he had to fight Zach once in the hallway. Vasco ponders deeply for a moment, then turns to Daniel, telling him he's not weak. He offers to help Daniel get stronger if he's interested. After saying this, Vasco walks away. He heads back to the store to grab some milk and a burn balm, since the cigarette he took from Jiho burned his fingers. Back at Duke's house, Duke is amazed by Daniel's incredible progress. He asks Daniel how he became so skilled and if he was just hiding his abilities during their first practice. Daniel blushes and looks away, saying he just practiced a lot. Finally, the day of the festival has arrived. We open with a great big blue sky. Tensions are low and vibes are high. People turn around and we can see a delivery truck driving in, carrying DJ Rufy, a senior from Practical Music. The driver is also a DJ who graduated last year. They park the car and start getting ready to perform. DJ Woofy puts his arm in the air and gets ready to lay down some sick beats. This is the true essence of the J-High Festival. We can see some food on display and a woman handing out flyers. J-High was famous for their festival, so everyone tries to, but on their best performance as possible. There was a range of ideas and stalls, snack booths, cafes, etc. The fashion department's show was a charity date auction, and they needed one more male participant, so it had to be either Daniel or Zach. They both said that they aren't interested. Zach tries to think of ways he can dodge the responsibility, so we come back to the present and can see him dodging punches. He is running a booth, where if you are able to hit him in a minute, you can double your money. So in the end, Daniel was chosen as the participant for the charity date auction. No one is forced to make money from your booth or do a performance though. For the beauty department, we can see Eli doing free haircuts as he makes a girl blush, telling her that she would look gorgeous with a little trim. The haircut is revealed, and the girl is blinded by love to see that he botched the haircut completely. The representative of the beauty department tells Eli that his haircuts still suck and asks him how he is so painfully bad at using scissors. We can see a line forming for Eli to cut their hair. The beauty department is declared a massive success for this year. We switch over to the baking department and can see that they are selling fresh bread. However, they don't have many customers. The baking department took a loss due to a lack in sales this year. The architecture department is running an arm wrestling stall. Someone mentions that Vasco has won 10 arm wrestles in a row. Vasco looks at the queue of big muscular guys and starts to cry. Jace tries to recover Vasco's mood by telling him they can do something different, something they can do with girls. He instantly lightens up again. Instead of doing arm wrestling, they switch their strategy and instead do a water balloon game, where people throw water at their faces. Unfortunately, Vasco pulls his serious face and scares away the customer. After switching their strategy, they made no money, putting them in a loss for the day. The next event is the fashion show. We can see some really weird costumes on display. One of the reasons the fashion show is so well known is because the clothes the models who walk the runway wear are ridiculous and make no sense. One of the models confronts the stylist and asks why he has been made to wear a shark head while being shirtless. The fashion show concludes and it is now time for the charity date auction, and last year's winner is the MC. He welcomes everyone and thanks them all for coming. The first participant comes up and is sold for $65. The next one is someone from the baking department. He gets sold for $80. For Ili Jiang, someone bids $50, then $100, and then $500, beating last year's record, which hurts the MC's pride a little. Apparently, all the girls from the beauty department pooled their money together to buy Li Jiang. Vasco is seen trying to leave, but gets dragged back onto stage. People start to compliment his figure, but when he gets nervous, he pulls a face that looks very intimidating and scary. This results in not a single person bidding for Vasco. One of Vinjin's friends is put on display, and since no one wants him, he is bought for a measly 50 cents. And finally, the last participant is put on stage. Daniel. The girls go wild, all eager to get a chance to bid on him for themselves. The main character can't help but chuckle to himself. He realized the moment he spotted Daniel that he would be the star of this year's event. Just then, a girl from Chanel private school named Lala jumps into the mix. She thinks to herself that J-High always has the hottest guys. The MC turns to Daniel and mentions that he was the one who fetched the highest bid last year, and it was Lala who won him. The year before that, DJ Rufy was also bought by Lala. The MC warns Daniel that if Lala wins again, he better run for it. He'll have to plan all the date activities, write her love letters, carry her bag out of the restroom, and shop with her until the mall closes. The MC makes it clear, if Lala wins, Daniel is in big trouble. Meanwhile, Jay, who has been eavesdropping, rushes over to the staff stall, only to find out that guys can't bid in the auction. Zoe slams her hand on the table and boldly declares 300. She thinks to herself that she's been saving for this moment. I have to go on this date with Daniel, she tells herself. Lala confidently raises her arm and bids $1,000, shocking everyone and completely overshadowing Zoe's offer. 2 years ago, DJ Poofy was purchased for $1,000. Now, as he recalls that day with Lala, a chill runs down his spine. Daniel starts to feel overwhelmed with stress. Out of nowhere, a voice from the back of the crowd yells, $2,000! It's the girl from the convenience store, accompanied by a man behind her. Daniel is left speechless, wondering if she even goes to high school based on her outfit. Lala, feeling competitive, hesitantly raises her hand and bids $2,500. The convenience store girl quickly counters, doubling the bid to $5,000. Lala stares in disbelief and in a fit of frustration tosses her bag into the air, claiming it's worth $7,000 and asking if she can use it to bid. However, the staff quickly informs her that only cash is accepted for bids. Going once, going twice, sold for $5,000. We see Daniel and the convenience store girl standing awkwardly in the parking lot. He thanks her for outbidding the other girl and for choosing him. The woman spins around and questions him about the other girl, wondering if he thought there was anything wrong with her. She tells Daniel that she didn't bid on him because she was genuinely interested in dating him. Don't look down on others just because you're good looking, she advises. Daniel feels a wave of guilt wash over him. He realizes he's been treating people the same way he was treated in his original body. As the woman gets into her car and starts to drive away, Daniel feels the urge to apologize for his harsh words. But just as he reaches out, the mysterious man seizes his hand. Daniel manages to break free from the man's grip, surprising both the woman and the man, as it's the first time anyone has done that. Suddenly, the man goes for a high kick, and Daniel instinctively raises his arm to block it. But at the last moment, he shifts his leg and he gets hit right on the side of his head. The scene shifts, revealing Vasco wandering around with a few juice boxes. Glasses expresses his desire to let Daniel go, but he feels unable to do so. He questions whether Daniel has good eyesight or if he has just become slower. Glasses praises Daniel for being strong and quick, acknowledging his talent. The mysterious figure is identified as Gun. The woman tries to convince Gun not to engage in a fight with Daniel, but he responds that he was instructed to eliminate anyone who gets too close to her. At that moment, Vasco enters the scene, asking what they think they are doing. Gunn inquires about Vasco's identity, wondering if he is a friend of Daniel's. "Yeah, I'm his friend," Vasco replies, leaving Daniel surprised by this revelation. Vasco sets down his juice box and warns Gunn that if he messes with Daniel, he'll have to deal with him too. Seizing the moment, Gunn strikes Vasco while warming up his shoulder, landing a punch right in his face. Vasco, unfazed, calmly tells Gunn to remove his glasses since he can't hit anyone wearing them. Gunn takes off his glasses, remarking that J-High has some intriguing students. Vasco raises his arms, preparing to fight Gunn. The woman clings to Gunn's arm, shouting that Daniel has never harmed her. She threatens him, stating that if he fights, their boss will send him back to where he came from. Gunn then apologizes to Daniel, explaining that he hasn't fought in a while and was just a bit too aggressive. The woman informs Daniel that the money will be given to a charity and that it doesn't really belong to her. As she leaves, she apologizes for Gunn's kick. As the car drives out of their eyesight, Vasco collapses to the ground, and Daniel panics, worried that he might have passed out. Vasco then asks Daniel about the guy with the glasses, but Daniel admits he doesn't know who he is either. Vasco claims that if he had to fight Daniel again, he could win, but there's no way he could take on the guy in glasses and come out on top. Feeling ashamed, he says he still feels too weak. Daniel sits down and expresses his gratitude to Vasco for saving him. Vasco offers him a juice box and they both sit in silence together for a while. Vasco confesses that he found the juice on the street, but Daniel appreciates that Vasco thought to grab two so they could both enjoy one. He thanks Vasco while taking a juice box, saying he's really thirsty. Vasco blushes a bit at Daniel's comment. As they admire the sunset, Daniel realizes that Vasco is his first real friend. The scene shifts to the festival, showcasing the lively singing and dancing performances. Vin Jin and his buddy just wrapped up their song, and you can see the sweat dripping down their faces. The audience is going crazy, and everyone believes that this duo has definitely secured first place. The CEO of the talent agency is spotted at the J-High Festival, while a staff member rushes to get the next contestant ready. Duke is dressed in his rap gear, complete with a chain and gold rings, but something feels off. Where's Daniel? Duke worries that if Daniel doesn't show up soon, he'll have to go on stage alone. Just when Duke starts to lose hope, Daniel arrives right on time, wearing a suit, tie, and a backwards cap. Daniel begins to doubt himself, fearing he might embarrass himself if he messes up or has a voice crack. But there's no turning back now. They step forward and take a look at the crowd they're about to perform for. Daniel's heart races like it's about to burst. He expresses his gratitude to Jay for picking out his outfit. The scene shifts to Jay, who beams as he overhears people complimenting Daniel's look. The MC hands Daniel the microphone and asks if he has a girlfriend. With a shaky voice, Daniel replies no. The MC glances at the crowd and tells Daniel that with all the fans cheering, he could easily pick anyone he likes. Daniel starts to wonder why the MC isn't directing any questions at Duke. The MC steps back, allowing the duo to take the spotlight. Duke announces that their next song is called Beautiful Day. As the backing track begins, Daniel's mind goes completely blank. When he finally manages to make a sound, it's off-key, making Duke anxious about missing his cue. Vin Jin chuckles to himself, knowing they would sound awful. The audience's reaction is frosty, which only heightens Daniel's anxiety. But then Duke raises his arm and starts rapping, instantly captivating everyone. Daniel is taken aback by Duke's confidence in front of the crowd. Duke winks at him, signaling that he can handle this. Daniel recalls their practice sessions at Duke's house, where Duke advised him to picture performing for someone special whenever he felt nervous, since everyone has that one person who means a lot to them. When Daniel pictures the audience as just one important person, it helps calm his nerves. He wonders who that person might be, and his mom immediately comes to mind. As soon as he thinks of her, Daniel opens his mouth to sing. For the second time during the song, the crowd is stunned by the incredible sound coming from the microphone. Duke watches Daniel and reflects on how much he has grown since their first practice together. The bullies recall all the times they picked on Duke and start to feel guilty about it. The CEO of the agency remembers how he dismissed Duke before even giving him a chance to showcase his rap skills. Vin Jin thinks back to all the moments he teased Duke, believing he was a bad rapper, but now he realizes he has some real competition. As the song wraps up, the audience erupts with excitement. Everyone starts praising Duke's rapping abilities, especially since they had always thought he was awful, thanks to Vin Jin's bullying. It's clear that Duke and Daniel's performance blew Vinjin and his friend out of the water. The CEO steps onto the stage, ready to hand over a card with his direct number, but ends up giving it to Daniel instead of Duke. Duke stays silent. Daniel then asks if he can also give a card to Duke, but the CEO responds that he doubts Duke will ever make it big because of the way he looks. He apologizes to Duke, claiming it's just business and nothing personal. After witnessing the CEO's treatment of Duke, Daniel decides not to sign with the OK Talent Agency. A few days after the festival, a video of their performance goes viral, racking up an impressive 23,000 views and 8,000 comments. The downside? Duke doesn't appear in a single frame of the video. We see him sitting alone on a bus, two girls nearby looking at him with disdain. Once again, he's scribbling down song lyrics, determined to channel his emotions into music. Zoe arrives home and calls out for her mom. She asks her where her laundry is. Zoe's mom replies that she hasn't seen it. Zoe thinks it's odd that her clothes seem to be disappearing all of a sudden. Meanwhile, we see Gangnam crouched at the end of the street, sniffing her underwear. He looks up with a creepy grin, imagining all the things he and his wife will do when they finally meet. Next, we shift to the convenience store, where Daniel is lost in thought about his last conversation with Yui. He can't believe they are the same person. Gangnam walks into the store, staring at his phone, and Daniel glances over to see Zoe's stream on Paprika TV. When he looks up, he sees Gangnam staring down at him with a fierce look. Daniel quickly checks the whiskey that Gangnam usually buys, but this time, there's something else that needs to be scanned. I wonder what it could be. Finally, we see Zoe taking out the trash while chatting on the phone. She shares about her streaming success and how she's gaining tons of new followers, hinting that she could soon be one of the top creators on Paprika TV. After putting her phone down, Zoe feels a wave of fear wash over her, since there's no one around to take her mind off the creepy atmosphere of the alley. Suddenly, a voice from the shadows calls out to her. It's Gangnam, asking for directions. Zoe jumps in surprise and tries to brush him off, saying she doesn't really know the area. Gangnam steps closer, but just as he's about to approach her, Daniel jumps in front of Zoe to protect her. Zoe is confused about how this guy knows her name. Daniel yells that Gangnam has a knife. Gangnam swings the blade at Daniel, who feels the urge to run and hide, but he knows he has to protect Zoe. The knife gets dangerously close to his head. Just as he's about to get hit, he remembers Zach's fight with Yui's boyfriend. Zach had managed to block the guy's punches and then landed a hit right on the side of his face. Daniel quickly strikes Gangnam's wrist, making him drop the knife. Now that Gangnam is unarmed, he starts to back away. Daniel twists his hips and bends his arm, barely missing Gangnam. He realizes he can't pull off the same move Zach did in his small body, so he decides to shield Zoe. Gangnam yells at Daniel, claiming that Zoe is meant to be with him. He starts throwing punches at Daniel, trying to reach Zoe. Finally, she remembers where she's seen Daniel before, when he went to the bar to pick up Big Daniel. Gangnam keeps trying to get through to her, but Daniel stands firm. Frustrated, Gangnam goes to grab the knife again, but before he can do any more harm, a barbell flies right at him. Vasco appears, panting and sweating. Gangnam collapses to the floor in pain, threatening to kill Vasco for ruining his perfect face. Vasco replies that he witnessed everything, and now he's his opponent now. Before Gangnam approached Zoe, we see a flashback of little Daniel peeking around a corner. He spots Gangnam watching Zoe's broadcast while holding a knife, so he quickly dials 911. Daniel tells the operator that someone is out on the street with a knife. They ask if he feels threatened, and he replies no. They then question if the person is drunk, and Daniel admits he isn't sure. The operator asks him to speak louder, but Daniel explains he's trying to stay hidden. They want to know if it's a razor or a kitchen knife. The dispatcher informs him that they've sent an officer to check it out, but Daniel worries they won't get there in time. He thinks about who else he could call nearby. He remembers Vasco talking to him when he was at the convenience store with Jiho and Duke, telling him to reach out if he ever needed help. Nervously, Daniel calls Vasco, who answers while working out. Daniel considers hanging up, but blurts out that there's someone with a knife. Vasco lets the weights fall from his hands, grabs his phone, and asks Daniel where he is. Just as Daniel is about to reply, Gangnam starts walking toward Zoe. Daniel drops the phone and yells at Zoe to be careful. Vasco shouts into the phone, trying to find out where Daniel is, but nobody can hear him. Now we're back in the present, and Vasco is complaining to Daniel about how he had to search all over town for them. Gangnam stands up, holding a knife, and yells at Vasco about what he's done to his beautiful face, claiming he won't lose this time. He boasts about sending Zoe a ton of balloons and insists it's not his fault he looks the way he does. He argues that he hasn't done anything wrong and is just playing the hand he was dealt. Vasco grabs Gangnam's hand and goes for his throat. He lifts Gangnam off the ground and tells him that using a knife against someone who isn't armed is unfair. Vasco squeezes Gangnam's wrist until the knife falls from his hand. He warns Gangnam to get ready as he prepares to throw a punch, but suddenly, a faint voice calls out from the ground. Gangnam's father suddenly appears from the shadows, pleading with Vasco to show mercy for his son. He bows his head to the ground, begging Vasco not to harm Gangnam. Vasco lets him go, and his father starts crawling on his knees, asking Vasco to forgive his only child. Gangnam yells at his dad, telling him to leave and insisting that he can take care of himself. Daniel watches Gangnam and remembers how he used to shout at his mom too. He thinks that Gangnam reminds him of himself. Gangnam then starts yelling at Vasco, saying that people treated him like he was worthless and judged him because of his looks. They disrespected him and discriminated against him. It's not fair, he screams in anger and frustration. The rich keep getting richer while the poor just get poorer. He tells Vasco that girls only care about looks and money, and that Vasco will never understand what it's like to be looked down upon because he's big and strong. Vasco cuts in, saying that it's not right to blame others for his problems. He asks Gangnam if he has ever tried to change things, but Gangnam replies that there's nothing he can do. Trying to change himself feels pointless, and he can't escape his situation. Vasco stares directly at Gangnam and tells him that he used to be just like him, but he overcame everything life had thrown at him. If he can, so can everyone else. Those words hit Daniel hard, almost like Vasco was talking straight to him instead of Gangnam. Soon after, the police show up and arrest Gangnam for trying to commit murder. Once the officers leave, people start coming out of their homes to see what all the noise was about. Vasco smiles at Daniel and thanks him for reaching out. Zoe runs over and gives Daniel a huge hug, asking if he's hurt at all. She praises his courage, and Vasco watches them with a tear rolling down his cheek. Meanwhile, a group of people is gathered outside the convenience store, waiting for Daniel to finish his bathroom break. The next day, Big Daniel reflects on Vasco's words about making a change in their lives. Zoe approaches him and he checks in on her, mentioning he saw on the news that she was attacked by a man with a knife. Zoe replies that she's feeling much better now and has decided to stop streaming. She even returned all her earnings to Gangnam's father. Then she asks Big Daniel if he knows where little Daniel lives. Daniel asks her why she's curious about that, and she smacks her forehead, asking herself why she is asking silly questions like that. Daniel thinks she's still feeling the effects of last night and forgets her question. Yui enters the classroom with bruises all over her face. Some students start whispering about her injuries and how she got them. Daniel says hi to Yui. Zach thinks to himself that he can't believe she's still flirting with Daniel, even in her current state. She takes out a handkerchief and says it's a gift, but it turns out she's giving it to Zach. His eyes go wide, hoping Mira didn't hear her. Yui thanks Zach for everything that happened last night and mentions that she broke up with her boyfriend. Zach leans in and whispers to Yui that she shouldn't talk about last night in front of Mira, or else she'll misunderstand and confront him. Meanwhile, we see viewers commenting on Duke's rapping skills, and the viewer count is at 52. Duke is really excited because he finally found people who enjoy his music and don't make fun of him for how he looks. Meanwhile, Mira and Zach are walking home from school, but they're in the middle of an argument. Zach insists to Mira that there's nothing going on between him and Yui, claiming it's all a big misunderstanding. Just then, the boyfriend from yesterday shows up and tells Zach he's been waiting for him. Mira questions Zach about whether he's been fighting again, and even though he tries to deny it, she cuts him off and says she's leaving. Zach drops to his knees. The older guys from before return, and the big guy asks Zach if he sent his girl away so she wouldn't have to watch him get beaten up. They notice Zach is crying, and they all start laughing. But Zach looks at them with a devilish smile, tears streaming down his face, and says he has nothing to lose now. He cracks his knuckles and warns everyone that he's not in the mood today. He starts swinging his fists wildly in the air, blaming everyone for Mira leaving him. In the next scene, we see Mr. Beanie and Mr. Necklace on the ground, agreeing to never mess with Zach again. Zach is sitting in class with a little smile on his face. He turns to one of his friends and asks if they can help him find a specific pair of shoes. He knows his friend is always checking Craigslist, so if anyone can find what he wants, it's him. Even though Zach looks happy, Namsu feels like Zach is bossing him around. After school, Namsu starts looking through all the listings, but everything is way more expensive than what Zach wanted. It turns out a famous pop star has been wearing those shoes, which is why the prices shot up. We see a series of clips of Namsu reaching out to different sellers, but he gets rejected every time. One seller asks if it's okay that the shoes are completely ripped, while another thinks Namsu is joking. Finally, he finds a seller willing to sell the shoes for $300. They suggest sending the shoes by courier, but Namsu insists on meeting in person. The last time he got something delivered, it was just a brick and a note that said, "Haha." Plus, the money he has is actually Zach's, so if he gets scammed, Zach will never let him live it down. He asks the seller if they can meet face to face, but they want to chat on Messenger instead, saying that's their preference. Namsu added the seller as a friend and noticed her profile picture was of a really pretty girl. He felt excited and a little shy about meeting her in person. The next day, he told Zach that he found a seller and was going to meet her. Zach said he didn't need to go that far, but Namsu insisted, telling Zach that when he goes in person, he can tell if products were fake just by looking at them. Zach thanks Namsu for picking up the shoes for him. After school, Namsu was all dressed up in the latest fashion, eagerly waiting to meet the seller. He knew girls liked guys who looked strong, so he put on shoulder pads, hip pads, and special shoes to make himself look taller. He felt like a superhero, thinking everyone was admiring him and calling him the most handsome guy around. When the seller arrived, she asked if he was the buyer looking for the shoes, but before he could respond, two guys hold him down and tell him to look straight ahead and smile like they're buddies, so no one gets suspicious. Namsu is pressed against a wall. The group that robbed him is busy counting the cash. The girl explains that Namsu wasn't actually chatting with her on the phone. The guy counting the money was just using her picture as his profile. He says it's always the losers who fall for this kind of trick. The big guy warns Namsu that they have his address, name, school, and phone number. If he tries to tell the police, they'll know exactly where to find him and beat him up. Namsu looks down, thinking about how he'll tell Zach that he got scammed. As the gang gets ready to leave, Namsu pleads with them to give him back his money, saying the $300 belongs to a professional boxer. The leader looks at Namsu and asks if he really thinks he looks that easy to mess with. He steps closer, saying he'll show Namsu just how scary he can be. Namsu is covered in bandages and tells Zach that he got tricked out of his $300, which he was going to use for shoes. He worries that Zach might hit him again and wonders if he'll have to pay him back. Zach, feeling frustrated, thinks he should have gone with Namsu. "You must have been really scared. It's my fault," Zach says. Namsu starts to cry, saying he didn't do anything wrong and that it was his mistake for trusting the profile picture and going alone. Yui joins in and asks what's going on. Zach explains everything, and Yui asks if they still have the scammer's contact. Namsu says he has their info on his phone and shows the profile picture. Everyone is shocked to see it's a girl, but Namsu explains he thought it was a girl too, until he got there and found other guys with her who robbed him. Yui mentions that their fake phone is valuable, so they plan to use it until the police catch on. They look up the profile on Craigslist and find all the fake stuff being sold. Zach suggests that they should use a different phone and pretend to be interested in buying something. He believes that if they think they're dealing with someone easy to fool, like Namsu, they will definitely show up. Namsu feels hurt by this. Zoe tells Zach he should change his profile picture to someone who looks easy to trick. They ask Jiho if he can look their way for a picture. Once they snap the photo, it turns out great. Jiho thinks to himself that he doesn't really understand what's going on, but he feels really uncomfortable and unpleasant about it. Zach sends them a message, and they agree to meet. Daniel asks Yui how she knows so much about this stuff, and she explains that her ex-boyfriend used to do similar things, so she learned a lot about scamming. The scene shifts to the group, who are back to their usual tricks. Their target is a guy with a baby face, but when they arrive, they discover he's actually a sumo wrestler, and he brought some friends. The gang leader tells them he doesn't have the laptop they want to buy. The sumo wrestler warns them that they're bad people and that they've picked the wrong people to mess with. They prepare for a fight. In a quick move, the leader kicks one of the sumo wrestlers in the head, knocking him out cold. He reveals that he has a black belt in Taekwondo and that the ones who have gotten involved with the wrong crowd are actually them. The leader's friend crashes into the other sumo wrestler. He pushes his hands back, and the sumo wrestler leader claims that they both have incredible strength. The leader then asks the last wrestler if he finally sees the difference in their power. The wrestler charges at the leader. In the next scene, we see him counting money while sitting on top of the sumo wrestler, who is face down on the ground. The girl looks down at the unconscious sumo wrestler and feels scared about leaving the gang because she doesn't want to end up like him. She starts to cry quietly, wishing someone would rescue her from this nightmare. Duke is sitting in front of a camera, getting ready to live stream on a site called Paprika TV. Daniel dropped by Duke's place because he heard Duke was going to host a music show. They set everything up for the stream and waited for viewers to join. A few people tuned in, but all they got were mean comments about their appearance, with some calling them pigs. During the entire stream, they only managed to collect 10 balloons, which are a form of currency that viewers can donate to streamers, later redeemable for real cash. Each balloon is worth 10 cents, but Paprika takes a hefty 40% cut when you cash out. Duke claims he's not really in it for the money, but he mentions that one of Paprika's top streamer is from their high school, Yui. A few days later, we see Yui chatting with Daniel about his performance at the festival and how well he did. Suddenly, Yui starts showering Daniel with gifts, including a designer wallet. Daniel recognizes it as the same pattern as his mom's wedding bag, which she only uses for special occasions. Feeling uncomfortable about receiving such an expensive gift, Daniel politely turns it down and wonders why Yui is being so generous all of a sudden. He starts to understand that she might actually like him, which feels strange for Daniel. He also realizes that this could be the first time he has a crush too. As the school day wraps up, Zoe approaches her friends to see if they want to go to karaoke. Two of the girls agree, but as soon as Yui mentions wanting to go shopping, the other two quickly change their minds and say they'd rather shop than sing. Zoe then pulls out a pouch and asks her friends if it looks cute and if she should buy it. Yui bluntly says it's kind of ugly and doesn't suit Zoe at all. The next day, the three girls are chatting and Zoe takes a closer look, only to see that Yui is carrying the very pouch she called ugly. Zoe tries to join in on their conversation, but they completely ignore her and keep talking. When Daniel walks into the room, the three girls suddenly perk up. Yui asks Daniel if he likes the pouch she bought, and he replies that it's nice. In that moment, Zoe realizes what's really going on and why her friends are acting distant. It's all to impress Daniel. Zach's friend, Du, pulls out a massive pack of cigarettes. Curious, Zach asks how Du can afford all his stuff and tells him that stealing is wrong. Du explains that he started streaming on Paprika to make some extra cash. He then invites Zach and the others to check out his broadcast. Jump scare warning ahead. In the next panel, we see Du shirtless, with hairy armpits and an egg cracked on his head. He spins around, thanking a viewer for sending him 100 balloons. Zach and the others are left in shock at the bizarre scene. Du lights a cigarette and counts his earnings from the stream, which total 400 balloons. He then hops onto Paprika to see if any cute girls are live streaming. To his surprise, he spots a familiar face. Zoe, who is streaming on Paprika now. She receives tons of donations and ends up with a whopping 10,000 balloons just for chatting with her viewers. Zoe wraps up her stream, expressing her gratitude to everyone who tuned in and contributed. She wonders if Daniel will start spending time with her now that she's making good money. The scene shifts to Yui, who is playfully making cute gestures at the camera to attract donations. The donations keep pouring in, and the chat is overflowing with balloon emojis. After a while, Yui finishes her stream and lights up a cigarette, grumbling about how exhausted she feels. Suddenly, her boyfriend pops out from behind a box, complaining that her stream went on for too long. He questions whether they need to keep their relationship a secret, and Yui apologizes, explaining that if her viewers found out she had a boyfriend, they might not donate as many balloons, which would mean less money for nice things. She then pulls out a wallet that Daniel had politely turned down and hands it to her boyfriend, saying she bought it just for him. The architecture department reflects on their first loves, with Jace encouraging Woong to stay positive, assuring him that he will move on soon. Vasco shares his own experience, recalling how he was really hung up on his first crush, even bringing her milk every day. Vasco explains that your first love can cloud your judgment, and when the girl you like smiles at you, it changes everything in your brain. The scene shifts to Yui and Daniel, who are hanging out as usual. Daniel asks Yui her opinion on overweight people, and she responds that she sees everyone as just people, so it doesn't bother her. He thinks to himself that Yui stands out from other girls. Yui then glares at Zoe. Meanwhile, Duke has been streaming for a while, but struggles to attract viewers due to his appearance. Jiho suggests inviting Daniel to join the stream since his presence usually boosts Duke's viewership significantly. However, Duke insists he doesn't want to rely on Daniel anymore. He wants to succeed on his own. Back with Yui, she frowns as she checks the leaderboards, noticing Zoe's profile gaining popularity. She thinks to herself that Zoe is catching up and even copying her catchphrases. Determined, Yui starts her own stream, trying to be even cuter. Balloons keep pouring in, and Yui reflects that attractive girls always seem to have an advantage. If you're good looking, money just comes your way. Duke is only streaming to 2 viewers, and neither of them are very nice. Just then, Daniel enters and asks what he's up to. He notices Duke is live and suggests they perform the festival song together. Duke agrees, saying, "Sure, come join me." Meanwhile, 3 people browsing Paprika stumble upon Duke's stream. The moment they see Daniel, they become instantly interested and start sending balloons. We then cut to a phone call between 2 mysterious individuals, with one urging the other to log on to Paprika TV right away. In the next scene, Lala discovers Duke's broadcast featuring Daniel. She feels it's fate that she found him again. To grab Daniel's attention, she sends an impressive 1,000 balloons, but soon after, another viewer starts sending even more. Determined not to be outdone, she decides to send 3,000 balloons. She laughs to herself, confident she can win this gifting war thanks to her generous monthly allowance. As night falls, we see Lala sitting in her chair, gazing up. She spent all her allowance and still came up short. Meanwhile, Jay is in his room, grinning at his laptop. The secret gifter from the stream has finally been uncovered. Duke and Daniel wrap up the stream, and their total earnings hit $2,000. They can't believe their eyes at the sight of that much cash. Next, we see Daniel at his cashier job. He scans a beer bottle, the customer pays, and leaves. He reflects on the stream and realizes it made as much as his entire monthly paycheck from working the night shift. Daniel starts to think about what to do with the $1,000 he earned from the stream. He decides he should buy a gift for his mom first, and then he can use the rest for Yui. Just as he's about to figure out what to get her, Yui walks into the convenience store with a guy. Daniel tells himself that the guy must be her brother, but just then, Yui grabs a box of balloons that are definitely not for kids. Daniel is puzzled about why she would buy something so mature with family around. Their eyes lock, and Yui asks him what he's staring at, saying he's annoying her. In the end, they choose not to buy the balloons. But as they leave, the so-called brother tells Daniel to keep his eyes to himself, knowing exactly what Daniel is thinking. Yui looks down at him with a judgmental glare and says he makes her sick. Daniel is taken aback. He's never seen Yui act like this before and wonders if the person in front of him is really her. A guy tells Daniel to speak up, but Daniel just stays quiet. He's lost in thoughts about the nice and sweet Yui he knows from school, but doubts start creeping in about whether she's really genuine. Yui then calls Daniel a pervert. The guy insists Daniel say something while getting ready to slap him, but somehow, Daniel manages to dodge it. Both the guy and Yui are shocked by Daniel's quick move. The guy is baffled, wondering how Daniel avoided his punch, which he had been perfecting for a decade. He tries again, claiming he was just going easy on Daniel the first time. But right before he can hit him, a voice calls out from the store entrance. It's Zach. The guy demands to know who Zach thinks he is, and Yui explains that Zach is in her class. Zach notices that the guy is Yui's boyfriend and thinks he looks like a thug. He realizes he shouted and starts to question why he feels the need to defend Daniel. Zach thinks back to the first time he fought Daniel and admits he's unsure about the whole situation, but he feels he can't let the man hit Daniel because he owes him something. The boyfriend calls Zach arrogant and complains that kids today lack respect. Zach spots the wallet in the man's hand, glances at Yui with a smirk, and calls her bold. He explains that the wallet was actually intended for a student in their class, but that student turned down the gift. Yui accuses Zach of lying and insists they should leave, but her boyfriend is curious and wants to hear more. Zach shares that there's a handsome guy in their class who Yui often buys gifts for, but but he doesn't like expensive things, so he usually turns them down. He adds that even his pants were a gift meant for this pretty boy. The boyfriend then asks Zach how he knows all this, and Zach replies that he sits next to the pretty boy, so he's witnessed everything firsthand. Yui accuses Zach of fabricating nonsense and insists he's just telling tales. But before she can finish her rant, a fist suddenly connects with her face, knocking her down. While she's on the ground, he kicks her, and Zach calls the guy a worthless piece of trash for treating his girlfriend that way. The guy asks Zach if he really wants to fight, and he challenges him to come closer so he can take him out. As the tension rises, Daniel considers calling the police. Now, let's switch scenes. We see a broadcast where Zoe is making a heart shape with their fingers, thanking viewers for all the balloon donations. A user named Gangnam Landlord starts sending in a ton of balloons. Zoe steps up her performance, thinking that to outdo Yui, she needs even more balloons. She expresses her gratitude to Gangnam for the support. We then see a hand on a mouse, and the person quietly says it's a pleasure. Finally, we discover who Gangnam really is. He tells himself that he's down to his last 60 bucks. He figures he can only afford 1 cup of ramen for tomorrow since he has to use the rest for balloons for Zoe. Zoe asks Gangnam what his job is, thinking he has a lot of cash. In truth, he's just a laborer, but he types in the chat that he runs several companies. He grumbles that he could have been a millionaire if it weren't for his dad being disabled. His father quietly mentions that he's hungry, but Gangnam doesn't pay attention. Then, someone in the stream starts donating more balloons, so Gangnam keeps splurging on balloons, and Zoe thanks him for the 2,000 balloons. Zoe strikes a cute pose and says she wants to marry him for all the money he's given her. Gangnam gazes at his monitor and replies, "I love you," back to her. The camera zooms out, revealing the messy state of his room, while his father weakly mutters that he's still hungry, but Gangnam continues to ignore him. We're back at the convenience store, and the boyfriend motions for Zach to come closer. He assures Zach that he won't hit him, but as soon as Zach steps forward, the boyfriend throws a quick right jab. Zach doesn't flinch, and the man takes a step back, feeling embarrassed at his attempt. The boyfriend taunts him, asking if he's scared, but before Zach can respond, he goes for another punch. This time, Zach doesn't even try to block. He just dodges it effortlessly and stares at the boyfriend with a blank expression. He turns to Yui and asks if she's close with Mira, to which she replies that they don't talk much. "Good," he says. "You didn't see me here today." The boyfriend then attempts his big move, but before he can even react, Zach lands a solid hit right on his face. He stands over the boyfriend and asks if getting punched hurts. The boyfriend gets back up and tries again, but Zach just keeps hitting him, again and again. Daniel watches in awe at Zach's speed, wondering how he managed to dodge those punches in his new body. He notices Zach using a different punching technique, shifting his weight from one leg to the other as his arm swings out from the side. He twists his arm at a right angle and slams it into the side of the boyfriend's face, sending him crashing to the ground. As the guy lies there, groaning in pain, Zach steps in and tells him he needs to learn to respect women. No matter how they behave, hitting a girl is never okay, Zach insists. He then turns to Yui and asks her not to mention anything to Mira about what just happened. As he walks out, he glances at Daniel and tells him he doesn't owe him anything. Meanwhile, Gangnam realizes he has spent all the money from his father's disability pension. He can't buy Zoe any more balloons now, since she hasn't mentioned him in her stream lately. He starts to feel like she has betrayed his feelings for her, as he thought that they loved each other. He nervously chews on his nail, feeling a mix of anger and determination as he declares that he will never forgive her. To get back at her, he needs to track down her whereabouts. Just before Zoe ends her live stream, Gangnam captures a screenshot, noticing a sign with some words in the background. He begins to investigate every possible location one by one until he finally discovers the right spot. His cheeks flush as he imagines meeting his beloved Zoe and all the fun they could have together. After all, he reminds himself he is Zoe's husband. Meanwhile, we see Zoe walking home from school with her backpack slung over her shoulder. She thinks about how she'll soon surpass Yui in viewers if she keeps up with her broadcasts. She's excited to show Daniel all the money she's made from streaming on Paprika TV. In the next scene, Gangnam is lurking in an alley, wearing a truly frightening expression. Back at school, Zach stands up, ready to get his money back and take revenge for Namsu. His friends all rise together. Daniel thinks to himself that they look really strong as a team. They ask Daniel why he's still sitting. Zach tells everyone to chill out. He can handle it alone. Daniel quickly makes an excuse about packing his books. Inside, Daniel feels glad they see him as a solid part of the group. We see Jay sitting at the side of the classroom, eavesdropping on their wild conversation. Then, the scene changes to Vasco and Jace, who are busy watering some plants. Jace curiously asks Vasco what kind of seeds he planted. Vasco replies that he brought fruit seeds because they taste great. He promises to share the fruits with everyone once they're ready to eat. Jace, looking a bit worried, asks Vasco what type of fruits he planted. Vasco casually says, durian. Jace starts to cry a little, thinking that durians are tropical fruits and can't grow in Korea. He reminds himself not to let Vasco know that the fruits won't grow. Just then, Zach's gang and Daniel walks up to them. The two ask where everyone is going. Daniel fills them in on what's happening, and Vasco asks if Namsu got hurt badly. They tell him that Namsu had bandages all over his face the next day. After thinking for a moment, Vasco decides to join them. He tells Zach's gang to stay with Jace since they won't be needed, and too many people would be troublesome in the fight. They agree to stay behind. Jace watches the three guys head off to get Zach's money back and reassures himself that he doesn't need to worry about them because they're all strong. Finally, after school, we see the parking lot where Jay is getting ready to ride his motorcycle. I wonder where he's headed. The group is hanging out in a cafe, and we can hear some people whispering about Daniel's good looks. Then, we see three guys giving them really mean glares. Zach notices and glares back at them. They keep staring at each other until he finally speaks up. Zach grumbles about how there are too many arrogant guys around. Vasco asks Zach if he can have another milk, but Zach declines. Daniel starts to sweat a lot because of the intense looks from the three guys across the room. Zach suggests they should just deal with those guys, but Vasco tells him to chill out. Zach glances out the window and is surprised to see Yui, Mira, and Namsu outside. He jumps up and tells Vasco and Daniel he'll be right back. He calls out to them, and they all turn around. Zach asks Mira what she's doing there. Yui says that once Zach is done, they can go to karaoke. Mira mentions she needs to grab a book from the bookstore, but can join them for karaoke afterward. Zach blushes a bit and says he'd love to go. Just then, he hears a voice behind him. It's the three guys from the cafe who were giving him dirty looks. The middle guy tells Zach to follow him into an alley for a chat. Zach tries to act cool, claiming they've mistaken him for someone else, and that he's never met them before. The two guys with him are busy checking out the two girls by his side. Suddenly, the gang leader shows up with his not-so-pleased girlfriend. Namsu yells at Zach, telling him it's the guy who stole his money, but before Zach can even react, the leader punches him right in the face. Dazed and confused, Zach struggles as the leader throws another punch and then another. Zach ends up on the ground, defeated. The leader looks down at him and asks if he brought any friends to help him out. Just then, Mira throws a rock at the leader and yells at him, demanding to know why he had to hit Zach before he could even turn around. The leader thinks Mira is cute, and if his girlfriend Harry wasn't there, he could have had some fun with her. He then walks away, saying he has other things to do and warns them to never show their faces to him again. Mira starts yelling at the top of her lungs, urging anyone to report them, hoping someone will hear and call the police. Zach grabs Mira's ankle and tells her to be quiet. He feels bad for her having to witness him getting hurt. Zach then asks Namsu how long they have until they meet up with the gang for the fake product, and Namsu replies that they have 20 minutes. Zach watches the gang leave and quietly says under his breath that this isn't over yet. The gang is shown waiting for the shoe buyer to show up. When the clock hits 3 o'clock, Vasco, Daniel, and Zach come around the corner. The gang leader is surprised to see Zach again and asks if he brought friends this time. He tells his gang that Zach is the one he beat up before, and they all start laughing. Vasco steps forward, but Zach stops him, saying he wants to make the first move. He challenges the three gang members to come forward. The leader laughs at Zach, saying he finds him funny. He brags about being a national judo fighter and asks everyone how old they are, just as Zach starts to answer. Suddenly, one of the gang members tries to kick high, but Zach is quick this time and dodges it completely. He grabs the guy's face and slams him into the wall, knocking him out cold, which surprises everyone around. Zach then challenges the gang to send out their next fighter. He stumbles a bit, and Vasco notices that Zach is getting tired. Vasco asks for a turn, but Zach refuses, insisting he needs to finish what he started. Next up is the sumo wrestler, who thinks that if he can just catch Zack once, it will be game over for him. He tries to grab Zack but misses. He tries again and misses. On the third try, he still misses. Zack keeps dodging all of the sumo wrestler's attacks. The wrestler thinks to himself that Zack is faster than their leader. Then, Zack slips between the wrestler's arms and delivers a solid punch right to his face. The bandana guy looks shocked as one by one, his gang members are taken down by just one person. Zack calls out for the leader now. Vasco notices that Zack isn't doing too well. His knees are shaking, and he can't keep his guard up for long. He thinks this might be the end for Zack, but he knows Zack won't just stand there forever. He's waiting for the perfect moment to hit the leader and take him down with one punch. Zack gets his hand ready, and Daniel sees what he's doing. He remembers his first real fight, getting his fists ready and aiming for the center of Zack's body. Suddenly, he throws a powerful punch to the solar plexus, sending the bandana man crashing to the ground. Zack looks down at the leader and says that being in the Nationals means nothing to him. He taunts the leader, asking how it feels to be on the ground in pain. Zack feels proud that he has finally regained his honor for Mira. Just then, a large group of men arrives, surprising everyone in Daniel's group. The leader warns them that they are in serious trouble since they are the most powerful group in town. Zack thinks to himself that he can't take on those guys alone, but Vasco raises his hand, telling him to take a break because he can handle it. Some members of the rival gang start to whisper among themselves, noticing Vasco's beard and tattoo, and they begin to think he's an adult who belongs to a real and dangerous gang. Vasco then turns to Daniel and tells him to watch his back. He explains that he needs to push through the crowd, so Daniel just has to stick close to him. Suddenly, a voice interrupts, telling Vasco that the boss should always come out last. It's the Bare Knuckles crew, here to back up Vasco for a fair fight. The leader recognizes their jacket emblem and realizes they are from the freshman monster gang from the east. It's the Burn Knuckles, the leader says, distressed. The leader feels more and more anxious as the bare knuckle fighters start to overpower his gang, taking control one by one. Vasco turns to Jace and asks how he knew he was there. Jace replies that their friendship allows them to communicate through telepathy. Vasco is touched by this, but the truth is, Jace just put a phone tracker on Vasco's device. Suddenly, a sumo wrestler sneaks up behind Vasco and threatens him, saying he'll crush his shoulders if he doesn't stop the fighting. Vasco quickly breaks free from the wrestler's grip and turns to face him. He places a hand on the wrestler's shoulder and starts to squeeze, causing the sumo wrestler to collapse in pain. The leader is shocked that their strongest fighter was taken down so easily. Just then, he gets a text saying that the rest of the gang has also been defeated. We switch scenes to Jay, who is smoking a cigarette. A flashback shows him cruising around until he overhears some students talking about a fight involving 3 guys. They encourage each other, saying that once they jump into the battle, victory is guaranteed. In the next scene, we see everyone sprawled out on the ground, while Jay smokes a cigarette, completely unharmed. We return to the main fight, where the leader charges straight at Daniel. He knows Zack and Vasco are tough, but since he hasn't seen Daniel in action yet, he thinks Daniel is just too scared to fight and weak. However, as he gets closer, he notices that everyone seems calm. Vasco is relaxed, and Zack is steady. The leader throws a left punch, but Daniel skillfully dodges it. He attempts the same combo he used against Gangnam, but now he's in his bigger form, giving him extra strength and reach. He throws a right punch to create some space, then steps in, bends his arm at a right angle, and delivers a powerful hook to the leader's stomach, not giving him a moment to recover. Daniel follows up with a straight punch, the same one he tried on the power machine before, but missed. A tooth flies out of the leader's mouth, and his gang falls silent after Daniel's hit. Zack thinks to himself that Daniel is definitely a boxing pro. Vasco is shocked as he recalls seeing that same shape with little Daniel, who used to carry Big Daniel on his shoulders. He notices that their postures and habits are exactly alike, almost like they are the same person. This makes him curious about the link between the 2 Daniels. Harry rushes over to her boyfriend to check if he's all right. Vasco looks down at him and reminds him to take care of his girl because love shouldn't be taken for granted. As he watches them hold hands, Vasco can't help but shed a tear. With that moment, the gang fight comes to an end. Meanwhile, Gunn is sitting in a car, having been contacted by someone to step in if the fight got too out of hand for Daniel. He's surprised that the Bare Knuckles won the fight and is also impressed by Daniel's fighting skills. He He now gets why he was told to keep an eye on him. The leader, his girlfriend, and the sumo wrestlers spot him and wave. He asks how they know him, and they explain that they saw him hanging out with some seniors in town a while ago. They say goodbye and go their separate ways. The next day at school, Zach asks Daniel if he's a boxer because he wants to have another fight, but this time with headgear on. Daniel says no, and Zach calls him mean. Jiho notices that Zach is wearing the new shoes and feels jealous that he got them for just $300. Yui approaches Zach and asks if he wants to study for the test together. Zach says no, because he never studies. Test? Daniel thinks. He suddenly realizes he hasn't even started studying for the upcoming tests.